in some respects, the Teflon-esque feel to Lara Croft of past, where she would fall 20 or 30 feet and then just barrel roll and stand up and move on to the next objective. Those situations are not necessarily real. And in order for us to have a real human character, we have to show that she's injured. We have to show that she shows pain and emotion. So, you know, a part of the game is not necessarily going around, as we said, picking berries and, you know, constantly looking for water, but certainly medical supplies. She will be injured, and you have to heal that injury, and they'll feel more real.
Yeah, some of those, like that spike that he mentioned, some of those are, you know, tonal in nature, but also the team is working on systemic ways to, you know, to heal and to have sort of things working that really just add to the whole experience and make the, you know, we don't want them to just be tonal. We want to have some gameplay in there as well. So they're working on that. We're just, you know, we don't have the details at this point.
Sure. Well, a user, Fallen Angel, asked a question that is actually something I was pretty interested in about the way you guys are approaching your game here, which is they asked, will the game be divided into missions or stages, as most games are these days, or do you guys have a different sort of structure in mind for the way that the gameplay is kind of put together that way?
It's a good question. I guess we're not going to, as we talked about the different sort of areas on the island, as Karl was saying, we didn't want to divulge any of that stuff. But
sure.
We, you know, I guess the one thing that we can say is that the structure is going to be different from what we've had in the past. And it won't be sort of, you know, necessarily, you know, level, load screen, level, load screen, level, load screen. We want to give the player a little more options to how they go about doing things, and so yeah, it won't be the traditional Tomb Raider structure for sure, and it won't be the same structure as some of our competitors either.
So you'd say there's maybe a little bit more freedom there to kind of explore. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I mean we're trying to be very clear about how, you know, that we're not an open world game by any means, but yeah, there definitely are areas in the game that give the player some freedom that we haven't had before. So.
Yeah, I think that's one of the core things that we've found over the last month from comments and forums and emails, is that we want to make sure we clarify that you will have freedom to explore, but it's not an open world game.
Yeah.
We're not going to give you the ability to be able to just go from one side to the other just like that. I know we've had some great experiences with Just Cause 2 in all the development time that we've had as a company, but we're not anything like that. This is very specific areas, freedom, and control. We still, for that, you know, survival feel, and for her character arc, we still wanted to have enough of control over, you know, over the pacing of the game and the macro beats, etc. So we wanted to give them some freedom, but we also wanted to have some specific moments happen at certain times for everybody. So, and there are games that use a similar structure out there. We just, you know, we're not that open world thing. And believe me, I'm super excited to talk about it, you know, more, but I just can't at this point, because I think it's some pretty cool stuff, the way that our world is laid out. So I can't wait to get into it more deeply.
Okay. Our reader Warbuff actually has some questions relating to these scenes we talked about in the article, Laura escaping the den, and the airplane crash scene. So he says, the article in GA made it apparent that button prompts to perform actions is a big part of play. QuickTime events generally remind me that I'm playing a game and break immersion. So he wants to know, have the button prompts been implemented in a way to make it feel natural to an action scene, or are we going to be tapping a lot of buttons?
The button prompts are definitely, we're trying to really integrate them in the way that you would just kind of playing the game normally. So all the button prompts, and they're still going through some iteration via playtesting, etc., but all the button prompts are intended to be, so, you know, if you're supposed to kick something at this point, then you actually use the kick button to do it. If you're supposed to interact with something, you use the interact button. So it's not just abstract sort of Simon Says sort of QuickTime events at all. We want to try to stay away from that. We want to, really the goal is to sort of get the player to feel what the character is feeling as much as possible. So and so some of the screenshots that were in the article and stuff, some of that might be iterated on in the future. But for the most part, most of those are things that you would actually, the button you would press if you were playing the game naturally. It's just these events give us the ability to craft the camera in a very specific way. You know, have very specific timing and voice lines and everything play out in a more cinematic fashion but then still give the player interactivity. So we feel like that's a better option than just having them watch a cutscene. So we just want to have all the interactions be what they would normally do in that situation. It's just crafted.
And the guys are working extremely hard to make it instead of just having those quick time events that you really do feel like you're participating. That you remember the airplane slide where we could have easily have just had Lara sliding down the side of a hill and you just watch it happen and press a button at the end. Now we give you full control on this consequence. If you move too far, too fast, you can get yourself into trouble. So it feels like you're participating more than just watching, which is really core to the essence of what we're trying to achieve.
Karl brings up to speak to the slide really quickly. One thing that may not come to people's mind when they read up on it right away is that the interesting thing about the slide is that it's a fully analog sort of big event. And in past games, for instance, slides have been sort of all 45-degree angles and very sort of specific the way that their parameters are. But for that slide in specific, it's fully analog. You have control over the whole time. You're sort of slaloming down the hill and dodging stuff. And at least for me, I think that's pretty exciting that our movement system allows for that now, as opposed to the more canned sort of motions like that.
Sure.
And I think the escape sequence, where I'm sure some people are relating to the screenshots where you see the left and right trigger prompts. Again, it's about putting the player as much into that situation as possible. Rather than button pressing, you're using the triggers in that instance to go hand over hand to try and escape, up along this path, this tunnel where the sunlight's shining through, and it really helps immerse the player into the feeling of I'm getting close, I got to go faster, and then a couple of little events where you got to try and avoid rocks. And again, it boils down to it's not about just putting one button in where you just keep hitting the same button. It's about really immersing the player into the experience.
Sure. Well, one thing in our cover story that we had in our little bullets at the beginning of the story was the fact that we have a release date window thing in there, and we had TBA, I think, is what we ended up putting in there. And so I know you guys aren't necessarily narrowed down yet to exactly when you're going to release, but January Snow, another of our readers, was curious about how long you guys have been working on it and in what stage of development the game is at this point.
So one thing we don't normally go into is how long. I think we've gone through a major kind of step back as a studio to reevaluate the franchise. You can see we wanted to be a little bit creative. We did things like Lara Croft and the Guardian of Light. We've done some work in the initial stages of pushing our engine above and beyond anything that we've ever done before. So some of the time was spent on that. And really now, I suppose we're open to say that we're at that kind of vertical slice stage of testing mechanics and pillars and pulling everything together. So if somebody out there can deduce when we're going to be shipping just from that information, you should come work for us. But no, we won't be announcing anything until certainly mid next year. I think again it boils down to experience. We're not going to release a game half baked, and because it's a whole new experience and we're trying to redevelop the character. These things take time. They don't happen overnight, as everybody knows, and we want to make sure we get it right. When this comes out, we want the experience to be 100%.
Yeah, one thing I'll say that I think I mentioned in another interview that when we talked before is that I was very impressed with Crystal's willingness to give the game a good incubation and pre-production time. So we won't talk specifics, but they did commit. They put their money where their mouth was, and we had time to really let things cook. Through pre-production, and I was one of the first people on the project as a creative director, and then when we hit pre-production, I moved into the new role. But I was impressive to see a studio devote themselves to a project like that. So.
Well, you guys, I know that you touched briefly, you mentioned the engine in your past answer. So Megalith was wondering, do you have a completely new engine this time, or is it just an updated version of the Underworld engine? And then Heartache asks, are the cutscenes pre-rendered or in-game?
So let's do engine first. Engine, it's actually our Legend engine, which amazingly enough is the same engine that built Legend and Underworld. The only difference now is that we've brought in 20 magicians who literally sit there rebuilding it from the ground up, and have done some phenomenal things with it. So no, it's the exact same engine. I think people will be hugely surprised to see what we've done with it. And then cutscenes, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, no, I think nearly all of the cutscenes are going to be, in-game rendered. I guess we might have some pre-rendered stuff, but I think some of that is still going to be discussed and we'll figure out. But the thing is that the screenshots that were in the article are the game. I mean, it looks amazing, and I was pretty impressed with the team to be able to send screenshots out that look that great. And so I think the cinematics are going to be fine as is. Personally, I think we'll still get all the emotion across, but and as we talked about, we do full mocap with multiple actors and voice all at once for the cinematics. So the performance should be up to par, if not better than stuff that we've seen out there.
And we'll over the next few months, and that we'll be talking about some of the unique new technological advances that we're using in mocapping. We won't do it just yet because that's actually a pretty cool thing to talk about. So we find the right time. But I think you've seen some of that in some of the tests that we showed you. Well, yeah, we were, and I think that the day after the cover went out, I tweeted that they were actually screenshots from in-game, and that was the first thing to get picked up and went everywhere. I know a lot of people couldn't believe it, but yes, they are screenshots.
Yeah, there was definitely some reassuring that had to go on that I saw. People like, no, really, really.
There was even a shocking moment for me when I was looking. I was like, wow, that was freaking amazing.
I know. I think I had to sit here I think we had the art director sat in here one night. I think he did like a 36-hour straight session of capturing screens for me, and we sat and went through every single one of them. It was hundreds upon hundreds, and I cannot tell you how hard it was to get down to the number that you requested for the cover story, because there was so many put aside. So we're looking forward to releasing them over a large period of time. But yeah, most of those files were well above the 50 megabyte mark by the time we actually finished with them. It was great to be able to have such a great choice. It really was.
Well, we have one last question for you, actually, and this is one that this is probably the most popular question that I've heard anywhere, comments, forums, anything. Amor Guy asks, when will we get to see the first trailer or gameplay footage of Tomb Raider? Because that's what they want.
The Holy Grail.
I was sitting there last night reviewing some of the latest passes on sections of the trailer, and I was actually going to tweet it to say how awesome it is. I was working and doing some fun revisions, but we are... Let's see. We're not that far away from it, but what I do want to make sure is obviously it portrays the right emotion and experience and really sets up the story of this new Tomb Raider. So I hate using the sentence "it'll be ready when it's ready," but there's a lot of time gone into this so far. And Meagan, you were with me when we were in Japan, and we saw behind the scenes what was happening. So you will be one of the first to be presenting it to the world, no doubt. And hopefully it'll be very soon. But it's exciting. I don't want to give too much away.
Yeah, I think that we would be massacred if we didn't ask that question, though. It's funny how much people they're just very, very excited to see Laura in action for the first time, as we all are. So.
Yeah, and I think again the goal for this first part of the campaign is to introduce you to this new character. So we've been very specific in the stories that we tell at the beginning of this campaign. So. Expect them to be about Laura and about how she's ended up in this situation.
All right, great. I think that we got through a sizable number of questions. That was impressive.
I think we covered a bunch of them. So sorry to folks who we didn't get a chance to throw the questions out there, but hopefully there's some other good information in there for you.
Definitely.
Cool.
And I'm constantly trying to reply to people's tweets and questions. So. Hopefully, if you don't get replies from us, you know it's a touchy question.
Cool. Thanks for your time, guys. We really appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Meagan. Thanks, Matt.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Appreciate it. Thank you all. Bye-bye.